Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a really fascinating look at the very architecture of wealth. We're going to literally deconstruct a specific mathematical blueprint designed to help you achieve true financial security and completely eliminate economic anxiety from your life. We're stripping away all the emotion and the ego and looking at the raw equation of what it actually takes to be free. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by redefining what wealth means, then focus on the main hustle. From there, Stoicism and controlling your spend, time and compound interest, diversification as financial Kevlar, and finally, the full person project. All right, let's get into it. Part 1, redefining what wealth means. Okay, let's dive right into this. The very first thing we need to do is completely shatter this illusion that pulling in a massive gross income automatically makes you wealthy, right? Society loves to confuse these two things, but they literally couldn't be more different. So the absolutely crucial point is this simple definition. You are rich when your passive income is greater than your burn rate. That's it. That's the whole shebang. Wealth is not some huge, flashy top-line income number. It's an incredibly simple equation where your investments spin off enough capital to cover your everyday expenses. Getting to this point, it offers a total absence of anxiety. It gives you the ultimate choice to work because you want to, not because you have to. To truly wrap our heads around this, let's look at the stark contrast between two totally different lives. On one side, you've got a bulge bracket investment banker pulling in up to $14 million in a great year. Sounds amazing, right? But he lives in Connecticut with a 52% tax rate, he's paying alimony, and he's maintaining this massive Hamptons home just to signal his status to his friends. He actually saves very little and lives with enormous constant stress. He is, for all intents and purposes, the working poor. Now, on the flip side, consider a father living on a Royal Navy pension, Social Security, and literally the quarters he collects from a dozen washing machines he owns in trailer parks. He makes about $52,000 a year without really working, but he's incredibly frugal. He only spends $48,000. He has absolutely zero stress. His passive income is greater than his burn rate. So, by the strict definition of our equation, the guy collecting quarters is the rich one, and the millionaire banker is poor. See? It's all about the ratio, not the absolute number. So why does that ratio matter so much? Well, it's because of how it totally transforms your daily life. You can essentially divide life into 3 buckets: things you have to do, things you want to do, and things you should do. You know, that should do bucket, like going to a networking event you absolutely dread or flying out for some distant coworker's wedding. Achieving economic security allows you to permanently cross out that should do bucket from your life. That magical ability to just say, you know what, I don't need to do this, so I'm not gonna. That is an incredibly liberating form of true wealth. Moving on to part 2, focus on the main hustle. Now that we know the ultimate goal, what's the very first actionable variable here? It's focus. We live in this era that is absolutely obsessed with the side hustle, but the math actually suggests a totally different path. Your first variable is to find something you are naturally good at and commit to becoming the top 1% in an industry that boasts a 90% or higher employment rate. Basically, find your lane and totally dominate it. Look, side hustles are fine for temporary exploration, sure, but if they drag on, they just become a massive distraction. Reinvesting just 10 or 20% of extra effort back into your main hustle provides a vastly greater return than constantly splitting your attention. Part 3, Stoicism and controlling your spend. Now, what's really interesting about this next concept is how it exposes the danger of early wealth. Imagine a young professional gets their first big corporate bonus. Let's say it's 28 grand. The ego immediately says, go buy a $35,000 BMW. Put yourself in debt, hang swimming goggles from the rearview mirror, even if you don't even swim, just to signal success and impress people. But the Stoic, disciplined choice, it's recognizing that nobody, and I mean nobody, cares about your stuff as much as you do. The mathematically correct move here is to buy a perfectly practical $12,000 Hyundai and systematically invest that leftover 20 grand into low-cost ETFs. And here's the concrete math drop on why that matters so much. That $20,000, if you invested it in the markets instead of burning it on a depreciating luxury car just to impress strangers, would be worth over $3.1 million today. Let that sink in. That is the massive compounding cost of ego. All right, part 4, time and compound interest. When you're young, you have one absolute, totally unfair advantage, and that is time. It acts like a magic multiplier. But our brains are honestly kind of terrible at calibrating how fast time actually moves. Let's look at how that impacts a highly emotional spending trap, elite private education. In places like New York, parents will agonize and place enormous financial strain on their households just to pay $62,000 a year for elite schools. And remember, that's roughly $100,000 a year pre-tax. They do this hoping to give their kids a marginally better chance at a good career to eventually secure economic stability. But what if we use the math equation instead? What if you sent your child to the perfectly fine public school closest to home? You reinvest their commute time into vital sleep and play, and you take that $62,000 a year from age 4 all the way to 18 and invest it in low-cost index funds. And this brilliantly illustrates just how staggering the math is. Even if you were totally wrong, even if your kid goes to public school, gets a mediocre job, and struggles to buy a home, if you were disciplined and invested that tuition money, you're going to have $5.3 million waiting to hand them when they turn 35. To put that into perspective, handing them that staggering amount of capital completely erases their economic anxiety far, far better than just giving them a chance at a slightly better starter job out of college. Part 5. Diversification as financial Kevlar. So you've focused, you've saved, you've compounded your money. Now you need a defense mechanism. To understand why this is absolutely vital, consider the danger of pure hubris. Imagine being worth $10 million on paper in a booming e-commerce stock, let's call it red envelope. Instead of diversifying, you actually borrow $3 million against it just to buy more of that single stock, thinking you're some kind of untouchable genius who can't lose. Then, boom, 2008 hits. The company goes bankrupt, you go from having $10 million to being $3 million in debt. The tax on your emotional and mental well-being is just crushing. The lesson here? Never assume you are Steve Ballmer. Market dynamics will trump individual performance every single time. To ensure you actually survive, you need a strict mathematical rule, and highlight this critical number, 3%. That is the absolute maximum percentage of your net worth that should ever be allocated to any single investment. When you actually stick to that 3% rule, diversification becomes your armor. Imagine investing in a highly touted healthcare tech startup with top-tier CEOs and elite venture capitalists. You fight tooth and nail to get into the deal. Then, suddenly out of nowhere, it goes completely out of business. Your investment drops to absolute zero. But because of the 3% rule, that loss, it might only bum you out for an hour. As this quote perfectly summarizes, diversification is your Kevlar. A total loss is literally like taking a bullet to the chest, but the Kevlar absorbs it. It knocks you off your feet, you get a nasty bruise, but you get right back up. You survive to invest another day. Finally, part 6, the full person project. We've covered all the hard math, but the final and honestly most surprising variable of this whole algorithm is character. This equation is ultimately a full person project. There's this persistent, kind of toxic myth in our culture that wealthy people got there by being totally ruthless, crawling over others and lighting cigars with $100 bills. But the data actually shows the exact opposite. The vast majority of self-made wealthy people succeed because they are high-character individuals. Why? Because greatness and wealth really lie in the agency of others. To get rich, you need allies. You need people who will invite you into rooms of opportunity when you aren't there, people who will give you the benefit of the doubt, and folks who will go easy on you when you inevitably mess up. And that only happens if you lead with generosity and character right from day one. So we've laid out the entire blueprint. We know that true wealth is simply the point where your passive income exceeds your burn rate, giving you total freedom from anxiety. But the math just doesn't work unless all the variables are in place. So I'm going to leave you with this question. Looking at your own life right now, which variable of the equation do you need to fix first? Is it controlling your spending? Is it dialing in your focus on your main hustle? Or is it developing the character needed to build lifelong allies? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this helps you build your own blueprint for freedom.